Hello, dear listeners, this is Form Camda. I hope you'll have a wonderful relaxing time listening to the novels I wrote myself. Today, we'll be diving into a novel called My Lord, Be More Serious.
Chapter 3, Where is he?
The poison has seeped in. It's okay. This poison can't do anything to me. Quoc Quoc grasped the white-clothed young man's wrist, helping him diagnose his pulse. As soon as she placed her hand on his, she grabbed the hem of his clothes and tore it off. She took the white cloth and covered his injured eyes, tying it behind his neck. She used the remaining cloth to bandage his other wounds to help stop the bleeding. After completing the task, Quoc Quoc reached out and grabbed the sword lying on the ground. She once again grasped the white-clothed man's wrist, pulling him over her shoulder and lifting him up. She carried him on her back and ran off. The 5 men in black, who were tied up behind her, stared in disbelief. A petite, slender young woman who looked incredibly weak and fragile was carrying a large man on her back. And she was running as fast as if she were being chased by a ghost. Were they seeing things, or had they underestimated her abilities from the start? That's right. Because they had judged her by her appearance, they had let down their guard, only to be caught by her using a few small pebbles to hit all their acupoints, preventing them from even speaking. Now they were left in this humiliating state, their smooth legs and sensitive underwear exposed. If anyone else saw them, how would they ever show their faces in the world again? It would take at least an hour for one acupoint to be released. How long would they be tied up like this? White-clothed fairy, wake up. Don't sleep. Don't sleep. Quoc Quoc ran while trying to call out to the white-clothed young man. But he didn't react at all, lying motionless on her shoulder like a corpse. After running for a while without knowing where she was going, Quoc Quoc saw a small abandoned house in the distance. She ran towards it. Entering the house, she quickly found a place for the white-clothed man on her back to lie down, placing the sword beside him. She ran anxiously to find some spring water. On her way here, she had heard the sound of a waterfall, so the spring water must be nearby. While she was getting water, she was lucky enough to find some herbs that could be used for disinfection and wound treatment. After returning, Quoc Quoc sat down next to the white-clothed young man. She used her thumb to press on his Renjong point. The white-clothed young man slowly woke up and grabbed Quoc Quoc's wrist, which was pressing on the acupoint under his nose. He waved his hand around wildly, as he was blind as a bat and couldn't see anything. He was terrified. White-clothed fairy, don't worry. I'll help you heal your eyes. Quoc Quoc quickly grabbed his hand, gently reassuring him. Your sword, I've placed it next to your right hand. You can just touch it and find it. Is it you? The white-clothed young man heard the familiar voice in his ear and immediately recognized her as the blue-clothed young woman who had fallen on him earlier. He was somewhat relieved. When he knew that his jade sword was right next to him, he was even more reassured. For those who roamed the world, their weapons were extremely important. The white-clothed young man was no exception. He valued his sword as his life. Unless it was a very special situation, he would never let his sword leave his hand. When his eyes suddenly couldn't see clearly, that was the special situation. Losing his eyes was like losing half his soul. At that moment, neither his sword nor his life mattered anymore. Quoc Quoc understood that the sword was the white-clothed young man's inseparable companion, so when she carried him away, she didn't forget to pick up his sword for him. And when he woke up, she immediately told him where his sword was so that he could feel at ease. Did we escape from those men in black? The white-clothed man asked curiously, gently and softly. Yes. I said I would save you, and I never break my word. Quoc Quoc nodded happily and smiled in response. But she was still holding the white-clothed young man's hand and refused to let go. The white-clothed man let go of Quoc Quoc's wrist with one hand. With the other, he cautiously tried to pull away from her hand. After all, men and women should keep their distance. No one was as unrestrained as she was, holding a man's hand for so long. Oh, I forgot. She was a woman who was obsessed with handsome men. She had scared the white-clothed young man half to death again. The white-clothed man suddenly clasped his hands respectfully and said politely, "Thank you, young lady."
White-clothed fairy, you don't need to thank me. Just remember that you owe me 4 kisses. Quoc Quoc laughed and waved her hand dismissively. She slyly leaned close to the white-clothed young man's ear and whispered. The white-clothed man felt her hot breath against his ear, coupled with the debt of 4 kisses that Quoc Quoc had just mentioned. His face suddenly flushed red, and both his ears were burned red by her. Being teased by Quoc Quoc again and again, the white-clothed young man felt embarrassed and shy. He quickly turned his head away, his hand gently clutching the sword at his side, his lips stammering, unable to speak. This? White-clothed fairy, don't worry, I won't ask for it right away. Just wait until your eyes are healed, then you can kiss me. Quoc Quoc patted the white-clothed young man on the shoulder, calming his heart. It was like a handover of goods, a handover of money. It seemed like she was very fair. May I ask how you brought me here? The white-clothed man asked curiously in a soft voice. He couldn't imagine how Quoc Quoc had managed to bring a large man like him here while he was unconscious. White-clothed fairy, you don't need to be so polite. Quoc Quoc said generously, then honestly replied, after carefully tying up those 5 men in black, I carried you here. The white-clothed man was shocked. He didn't expect a small woman like her to be so strong enough to carry him. His weight was probably much heavier than hers. And she had walked a distance that wasn't short? If the white-clothed young man knew that Quoc Quoc not only carried him but also carried him as if she were flying, he would be even more surprised and terrified. The white-clothed man clasped his hands again, maintaining his manners, and said respectfully in a soft voice, Young lady, I was rude. Please forgive me. Oh, don't mention it. This is non-height tung. I got it from the body of the tung bark tea tree. White-clothed fairy, eat it quickly. It will help you eliminate some of the toxicity of the man Latan. Quoc Quoc immediately took out a piece of lichen that was silver in color with red veins around it. She brought it to his mouth and fed it to the white-clothed man, talking non-stop. This MNL-tan is a poison I've never heard of before. I don't know what's special about it. I hope you can enlighten me. The white-clothed young man's voice was soft and gentle like jade, and he asked softly after finishing the non-height tung. MNL-tan is a poison made from the venom of a poisonous spider found in the desert called the Tam Kin Lam Thu, combined with NGSC though, KMN tin, and Lyen Kai. Grind the Lyen Kai and crush the KMN tin, then mix them together. Then add a little venom from the Tam Kin Lam Thu and mix in a little dried NGSC though decoction. Roll it into pills and let it dry, then grind it into fine powder. That's how you get Man Latan. Quoc Quoc stood up, went to the water basin and the pile of herbs. She ground the herbs into a fine paste and squeezed out the juice. She put the cup of herbs into the water basin, then picked up the small basin of water and brought it to the white-clothed young man. She was busy with her hands, and her lips were also moving non-stop. To detoxify the Man Latan, you need herbs like non-height tung and T-sam, dip tnhtht, longkantho vabch tutla. The white-clothed man listened quietly to Quoc Quoc. She put the basin of water down, took out the cup of herbs, and sat down next to the white-clothed young man. Then, without saying a word, she suddenly grabbed the hem of his clothes and tore it off. The white-clothed man was startled and quickly asked, Young lady, what are you doing? I'm helping you bandage your wounds, white-clothed fairy. Quoc Quoc took a clean piece of cloth, put it in the basin of water, removed the bandage that had been used to stop the bleeding for him, wiped away the blood, and cleaned the wound. She put a little disinfectant herb on the clean cloth, pressed it against the wound, and bandaged it neatly for him. Your medical skills are superb. May I ask your name and lineage? I wonder who your master is? The white-clothed fairy asked slowly and politely. My master is also my parents. And my name is Bach Quoc, you can call me Quoc Quoc. Quoc Quoc laughed, a smile that could captivate the world, but unfortunately, the white-clothed man couldn't see this smile. As soon as she finished answering, she quickly asked the white-clothed young man again. What about you? Just call me a sung, Bach miss. Don't call me the white-clothed fairy anymore. I really don't dare to accept those 2 words, fairy. The white-clothed man politely and modestly shook his head.
You can call me Quoc Quoc, but you have to call me Quoc Quoc, and you can't be polite to me anymore. Quoc Quoc's voice sounded very generous and magnanimous, but her actions were completely the opposite. Because the white-clothed young man couldn't see anything, only a patch of dark sky, due to the white cloth tied across his eyes. So Quoc Quoc could do whatever she wanted in front of him. She didn't worry that he would find out. Her hand gently brushed over the delicate features of the white-clothed young man's face, but she didn't dare to touch it. She was afraid of scaring the white-clothed fairy away, so she had to hold back a little. Sooner or later, she would be kissed by this handsome man, so there was no need to worry. Okay. Quoc. Quoc. Miss. The white-clothed young man nodded slightly, but he was used to calling her miss. He quickly covered his mouth with his hand, preventing the last word from coming out. Quoc Quoc saw his cute gesture and burst into laughter. The white-clothed young man was embarrassed by her teasing and blushed. He quickly withdrew his hand. Every movement he made, even though it was hurried, exuded an unusual elegance. A sung. So I know what your surname is. Quoc Quoc suddenly spoke up playfully. The white-clothed young man heard this and felt a little cautious and worried. He tilted his head slightly, his brows furrowed slightly, as if he were waiting for Quoc Quoc to continue. Quoc Quoc mischievously said, "A sung, your surname is Thatch, right?" Surname Thatch. The white-clothed young man didn't quite understand. His brows furrowed a little tighter. Then he suddenly understood what Quoc Quoc meant. She was saying that to tease him. If you combined the surname that Quoc Quoc had just guessed with the white-clothed young man's name, it would be Th Sung. It sounds like a gecko. Ha. I was just kidding. Quoc Quoc laughed triumphantly, rolling with laughter. On the white-clothed young man's face, there was not a trace of anger at being made fun of by Quoc Quoc. He was always like this, gentle as jade. He even smiled slightly, smiling with her, going along with her. A sung. Why were you being chased by those people? Were they trying to rob you? Quoc Quoc turned her head and asked curiously. The white-clothed man remained silent for a long time without answering. He was lost in thought, recalling memories he didn't want to remember. If it's inconvenient, you don't have to say it. I was being nosy. Quoc Quoc tried to sound cheerful, but she couldn't hide the awkwardness mixed with a little bit of it. The white-clothed young man shook his head gently. It's because I discovered and destroyed their evil deed. In the bustling city, the white-clothed young man held his jade sword and walked lightly along the street. He stopped in front of a deserted alleyway and turned his head to look inside. Suddenly, he caught sight of a masked man in black, brazenly kidnapping a child in broad daylight. He even knocked down the child's mother, while she stubbornly tried to get him back, to protect her son. The masked man in black immediately fled. The white-clothed young man saw the injustice and stepped in to help. He quickly stepped on the walls and chased after the masked man in black who was carrying the young boy on his shoulder and running away. At this time, the young boy was still crying in fear, calling for his mother. One black-clothed man ran ahead, one white-clothed man chased after him. They jumped over the rooftops, and soon they reached the forest outside the city. At this point, the masked man in black stopped running, as if he were waiting for the white-clothed young man to catch up. He threw the boy on his shoulder to another man to carry. The white-clothed young man wanted to chase after him, but he was surrounded by 11 more masked men in black, in all directions, behind and in front of him. The 12 masked men in black immediately charged. A battle in the deep forest ensued. The white-clothed man fought against 12, his body covered in wounds, and he opened a bloody path to escape. The masked men in black were in hot pursuit.
How dare they? They dare to kidnap children in broad daylight. They harm good people. They are truly wicked and immoral. Quoc Quoc was furious when she heard this. She stood up and stomped her foot, cursing. If I had known this earlier, I would have punished them for a while longer, so that they would be half dead and half alive, and would never dare to do evil again. It's okay. I'm fine. Don't be angry. The white-clothed young man gently and softly tried to comfort her. To help Quoc Quoc calm down. The situation was a little unusual. The outsider was angry on behalf of the victim. On the other hand, the victim was comforting and reassuring the outsider. Isn't this strangely incongruous? They left you with injuries all over your body, and your eyes were poisoned and you couldn't see clearly. And yet you say you're okay? Quoc Quoc couldn't calm down. On the contrary, she was even more furious. The white-clothed young man really didn't know what to do. At this moment, he could only smile slightly, but this smile was too beautiful. It made people see it and their hearts would soften. They wouldn't be able to be angry anymore. Okay. Let's forget about it. Now, son, you rest here. I'll go out and find some herbs to detoxify you. Quoc Quoc waved her hand, turned around, bent down, and gently patted the white-clothed man's arm a few times, then ran out the door. Okay. I'm bothering you, Quoc Quoc. The white-clothed young man nodded slightly in agreement, gently and naturally said. Asung, you're being polite to me again. If you think I'm working hard, why don't you just kiss me a few more times? Quoc Quoc stopped, turned back, smiled seductively, and mischievously teased the white-clothed young man again. Ah. The white-clothed man was caught off guard by Quoc Quoc's teasing. He was caught off guard and exclaimed. He blushed with shame and quickly turned his head away. Quoc Quoc laughed triumphantly. Her laughter was as light and carefree as the moon. Teasing someone as easily embarrassed as the white-clothed young man made her very happy. She really wanted to keep teasing him. It seemed like this time she had accidentally found a little white rabbit who blushed easily. Quoc Quoc closed the door and happily turned to run away. She didn't know that as soon as she left, a man in black robes, with a wide-brimmed straw hat with a face veil full of mystery, came to the abandoned house. Behind him was a giant sword, no different from a broadsword, pointing towards the abandoned house. He walked quickly towards it. After finding the herbs, Quoc Quoc returned to the abandoned house. As soon as she opened the door, she was astonished. Hey? Where is he?